Happy Tuesday! It's time for Stories with Sarah Lizabeth. Thank y'all so much for joining me today. So for this story today, I had to go way back, way back in the memory banks. And it's a great story, y'all, that I totally forgot about, probably because I had post-traumatic stress syndrome from it, but it's a good one, and it's about my Alabama boys. It's about some Alabama boys that just couldn't get enough. So can't wait for y'all to hear about it. All right, y'all, let's first talk about protocol for a bar. If you are holding your wedding at an establishment other than your home, there are a few things you should know. First of all, above everything else, y'all know I love stories about people that just cannot handle their alcohol. It's like my favorite thing ever. But one, you have to have an ABC licensed bartender. This is very important, y'all. And they have to hold the liability insurance because you don't want anyone to get overserved and go drive off your property and get in an accident and then they're coming back after you. So this is why bartenders are important, and this is why bartenders hold the liability so that y'all don't have to do that if something awful and dreadful were to happen. Another thing is, it is not okay for people to start drinking just the bottles of liquor off the bar. This is not the Golden Corral of bar, okay? So we don't get to just go up to the bar and start downing bottles of liquor, okay? So you have to have, these are the things that you don't do in a professional establishment where you're holding your wedding. Now, what you do in your backyard or your friend's backyard, that's a whole nother ball game. But when you've hired someone to come in and be your planner, and when you're attending an event at a public facility, you do not drink liquor bottles off of the bar. That may or may not have been what happened with my Alabama boys, though. This is a whole nother story. So let me paint the picture for you. Probably about 80% of the clients that I get to serve, they are destination, Nashville weddings. So they're coming to Nashville. There's 22,000 people that come to Nashville every year to get married. So there's plenty of business to go around for sure. But probably 80% of my clients are people that are planning their wedding from out of state and coming into Nashville. Well, this was my Alabama crew. They were all from Alabama. They went to Alabama University. They were excited to come to Nashville. And the venue was a beautiful winery here in town. And so it was just a holy hot mess of all these things put together that ended up where this story is gonna go. So, it was a beautiful day. The clients were so sweet and kind, and, everyone was beautiful. Everyone was just like straight out of a magazine, gorgeous. So it was just a really good day. Well, they got to the property at 10 a.m. and the guys were kind of off in this other house and they were getting ready there. And so I just kept, going in, and I was setting up all the flowers and decor and hanging the lights and draping and all that stuff in the barn. And then the bridesmaids and the bride were in one house, and the groom and the groomsmen were in another house. So I kept going back and forth and checking on them. Well, at 10 a.m., y'all, they were like, we do not have the appropriate things that we need to open up the beverages. And so I was like, cool, like, we're going at 10. This is awesome. So, it's kind of like when you're in a wedding, it's kind of like you're on vacation, and people, that go on vacation, they just, when you're on vacation, you just do whatever you want. So 10 a.m. is totally normal to have a drink when you're on vacation. So, so I'm going off searching for some openers and some things for them, and so that they could get going at 10 a.m. As the day went on, my Alabama boys, they just kept getting more and more excited about being there, and they were watching football and, on the TV and stuff, and they were just having a grand old time. And I was like, this is probably not going to end well, because they've been going at it since 10 a.m. with, with the hard liquor. I'm not talking about they were drinking beer. They were drinking hard liquor. And so, and they had special kind that they wanted to partake in the morning. So anyway, so they were drinking and they were going to town, and, I start to get close to the time where I need to go line them up. Well, I as their florist as well, I am, pinning on the boutonnieres and handing out the bouquets and doing the corsages and everything. And so I'm pinning on the boutonnieres on my Alabama boys, and they smell. They smell. And, and I'm like, way to go, dude. Like, I'm glad you're having a good time. So I had a good time with them. I was pinning on these boutonnieres. They were, making fun of me because I was working so hard. So go figure. But no, they were in good spirits by the time we got to 5 o'clock. And so, we carried on with the ceremony. Somehow they all made it down and they all made it back, and they were married, and it was great. So we were on to the reception, and at the reception, we had a bartender and a bar, a full bar. So that means we had beer, wine, and liquor. And so, the party was going, everyone was having a good time. I was watching my Alabama boys, and they were starting to get a little rowdy. Like, it was like they were back in college, and somebody was getting ready to throw down. I mean, it was intense. So, and it was interesting because there was really nothing that was wrong. They just started kind of, agitating each other and picking on each other, and then it would turn into, one person's yelling at one person, and the other person's like, threatening to pounce. And so I'm just like watching them. So it made for a really, really interesting night. We did, dinner, and they did dancing. And at this point, like, I'm going up to talk to people that, my Alabama boys that I met in the morning. They are not my Alabama boys that I met in the morning. They are different now. They have somehow changed. And, the atmosphere and the feel is getting a little intense at this point. I have never in over a decade, way over a decade, have I ever shut down a party. This is a fact, y'all. I am like, where's the party? I want to be a part of it, but I have never shut down a party. And, I'm all about people having a great time and enjoying their time, and, that's what I want at a wedding. So, but it was kind of getting a little dicey, and, one thing that I didn't tell y'all is that I was 9 months pregnant. I mean, I was pregnant. So I was hauling chairs and tables and throwing linens and putting the dishes out. And we were at the end of the night. So just personally, I was done. I'd been on my feet all day. I was 9 months pregnant. I think this was one of the last weddings because I induced my child between two weddings. So I think this was one of the last ones before I induced her to come into this world so that I could work a wedding and then have her and then work another wedding the next weekend, because that's how I roll, Alabama style. So I just, I was like, okay, well, this is getting kind of sketchy. I am a female that is 9 months pregnant, and I'm the boss. So I'm like, I gotta figure out what to do. So the security at the facility, they kept coming up to me and saying, well, we're getting a little out of hand here, Sarah, and we need to take care of the situation. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, what would you suggest? And they were like, well, we need to cut them off. These Alabama boys, these particular 15 guys, we need to cut them off. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I'm the one that gets to do that. That is so great. I'm so excited about that. And so I talked to security, and they were like, if you don't do it, we're shutting this whole wedding down. And I was like, well, that can't happen. I mean, it was only like 8 o'clock. They were going for another 2 hours. And so I had to make a decision on how to handle my boys. And they were not up to speaking to me, like, with me about anything that made any kind of sense. Like, there was no going up to them and saying, guys, if you could just, hang on a minute and calm yourselves down. You won't be stirring the pot over here with security. I can get you some drinks, but you need to take a little breath. Like, take a little, not a breathalyzer, because you will not pass, but take a little time out from the party for a minute and just go dance and enjoy it and sweat some of that out. And so, I had to talk with security, and then I had to, and they were threatening to shut the entire wedding down if I didn't put a stop on these boys and their alcohol issues. And so I was still tearing down, the wedding, and we were kind of to this point where we were pulling centerpieces and everyone was upstairs dancing. And so I was working, that was the time of the night where I'm working the hardest, really. And so, so I get word that I've got to do something about my little Alabama boy situation. So I walk by the bartender and I make a comment to him, and I say, and this guy, there were several bartenders that night, but the one that was on the main bar, that the guys that had the liquor, this guy was not the biggest, guy in the world, and he just, if he told them anything, they were like, squat on you, no, no, like, we're gonna drink, bro, you're just a little bartender. So I made a comment to him that we needed to kind of, assess the situation and really get account for who we needed to sort of cut off. Because I didn't know if we needed to cut all of the boys off or if we needed to cut just a handful that were stirring the pot. So, so he kind of, took a little, assessed the situation for me, kind of watched out for the boys. And then I came back. And he said, there's really like 5 guys, but they have a squad. And so it's really all 15 of them. But, and there's also this one female. It wasn't the bride. It was a girl that went to school with them in Alabama. And, but she was kind of like their ringleader, y'all. Like she was like, yeah, stirring them on, and like they were back at a frat party, and it was go time. So they were not at a nice wedding in Nashville. And so, she's egging them on. The bartender's kind of giving me an assessment. I walk away for a second because I was holding, flowers and stuff, and so I had to take them back to our trucks. And all of a sudden, one of the bartenders, not the little guy, but one of the bartenders comes to me and says, "We've got a situation." All right, so normally on an event day, when someone says, "We've got a situation," I'm like, a little bit like, yes, because I thrive in these kind of situations where I have to problem solve on my feet and do it quickly. And, I'm running these events and everyone's looking at me for answers, and I love it. Like, it gets me excited, and it gets me, I love my job for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons I love it is because I'm really good at, adapting to things and thinking about things like right on the fly. So when someone typically says, "We've got a situation," I'm like, how can I help? Like, what is it? Let's get it done. Let's figure it out. Let's make it work. But I did not want anyone to come up to me at this wedding and say, "We have a situation." I already had security threatening to shut the whole wedding down. And I had my Alabama boys and their little ringleader, cheerleader, which, could have been a cheerleader from, back in the day, I don't know. And so they come up to me, and this bartender says, "We've got a situation." And and I'm like, well, whatever could it be? And so I follow him around and he's walking towards the bar, and I'm just waddling at this point because I'm 9 months pregnant. So here comes Sarah. And I hear from the little bartender boy, I hear him go to all these guys. These guys are standing at the bar. They're picking up the bottles of liquor and like downing them. Like there is no control over any of them anymore. Okay, bartender does not have control over the situation. And so they're just picking up, the bottles of wine, and they're picking up the bottles of liquor, and they're like feeding each other liquor. And I'm just like, this is a situation. Like, we do have a situation here. And the bartender says, "She's the boss. She's cut you guys off." And I was like, what? All 15 and their little ringleader turn to me, okay? And they start like literally charging me and saying, "What?" And just berating me and screaming at me and saying like, how could you cut us off, and blah, 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 and yelling. And like, ringleader girl, she comes around and she's like in front of them, and then they're behind her, and they're all walking to me with liquor in their hands, okay? Liquor bottles, whole bottles of liquor. And she gets up in my face and she does this. Who do you think you are? And, I was like, I'm the one in charge, ma'am. How can I help you? And there's no discussing, there's no reasonable discussion here. There is just a lot of flailing the finger and the yelling at me in words that I don't even understand what she said. But there was one point where I thought, okay, if she wants to go fisticuffs, I'm going. I am 9 months pregnant, but I am going, because she cannot stand here and put her finger in my face like this. This is not okay. So I let her do her thing, and she was quite intense, and there's no way that, I was 9 months pregnant, but I highly doubt that she could even comprehend that I was pregnant. So I spoke it, and I said, ma'am, I'm gonna need you to back up a little bit for me. I'm gonna need you to give me some space. I've got a human being in between you and I, and my job is to protect this human being. So I'm gonna need you to back 2 steps up for me, okay? And then we'll discuss this. And so she's like, oh, well, okay. She didn't talk like that, but maybe she did. She did not talk well. She was not a good talker. And so she was struggling a bit. And so she starts flailing, the finger, and she backs up a little bit, and she's like, how could you possibly, cut my boys off? And I was like, well, the security is threatening to, close down this whole entire wedding if y'all don't back up a little bit. And I said, here's the deal. You guys need to calm down. So I need you to give me 30 minutes of no drinking. Not one of you can come back to this bar. And you guys are cut off from the bar for 30 minutes. And, they were not happy with that. And so what do? They run over and get the groom, and they send him over like, who is this person? What is she doing? Why is she cutting off the bar? They were mad. And so he comes over, he's in the middle of this hot mess of a situation, trying to figure out what in the world is going on, because he's not, they're not acting like this in front of him. They're only acting like this in front of the bartender and myself. And so I'm explaining to the groom, who I was able to speak with, have a good conversation with, and say, listen, they're threatening to cut us off and completely shut down this party. We still have two more hours to go. Not one of these guys can come back to the bar for at least a half an hour. It's gonna be the deal, or else they're gone. And so he was not happy with it. He wasn't happy with that because, in his mind, he was like, well, we paid to be here, and if we're paying to be here, then my guests are going to be able to eat and drink and do whatever they want. And sadly, that is not what happens at an event. Okay, you don't just get to do whatever you want, and you can't just do that. So I had to have this conversation with him and let him know, I understand that you paid for this wedding. It's wonderful. It's a fabulous day, but we could not have a free-for-all at the bar. It's not gonna be how it works. So these guys need to calm back, step back a little bit, calm down, and if they don't, then the whole party's being shut down. So what do you wanna do? And, and he was like, well, I guess I'll tell them to stop, coming to the bar. And I was like, I think that's a great idea. Let's give it a breather for a minute. So it was like they had a stopwatch right there. They all stood just a couple feet from the bar. And it was literally 30 minutes from the time that I told them that they couldn't go to the bar, that they were back at the bar. So at this point, we're getting to be about an hour from when, we're leaving. So the bar's gonna cut off in 30 minutes. And so, we just started to give them less at the bar and, not give them as many drinks. And then, and then they were off, and the reception was coming to an end, and we did the sparklers and, had the exit. And, it's impossible to do an exit with people that are this intoxicated, because you're telling them, hey, I make an announcement, right? I get everybody lined up and I say these words. I say, these sparklers are not normal sparklers. They are essentially fireworks by law. And they will burn you, and they will burn this wooden barn right here. So you cannot go back into the barn with the sparklers, and you cannot, you gotta hold it out. And, don't try and put it out with your foot. which it never fails. Someone always does. Even though I tell them don't do it, they do it and they burn themselves. And and then they're like flailing these things like they've never seen a sparkler before in their life. It's like the most exhilarating thing they've ever experienced. I'm like, it's a sparkler. It's a sparkler. It is fire. It will burn you, but they never listen. So, we had some situations during the exit, but we got everything, all the sparklers put out, and we picked up all the sparklers, and then they were off. And so, they had a shuttle for a lot of the people that were there. And some of them just, drove to the property, and this was before Uber or Lyft or anything. So, that was a little disturbing because I knew that there were people that should not have been driving. And it was just unfortunate that it got to that level, and the fact that, they just, so many of them could not control themselves, and it just turned into a bad situation. So we had a lot of security there. And turns out that they were checking everybody before they left the property. So while we were tearing down, there were people just standing outside until they could drive, which I'm very grateful that this facility did that and had police officers there and were like, you're not leaving until you can drive. And so that was good. That was a good thing. But that caused a lot of people to be very upset that they could not get home in, the next 30 minutes. So, it was just a hot mess, y'all. It was a hot mess of a bar situation and some Alabama boys that didn't want this, Nashville girl to tell them what to do. So, it was an interesting night, and, I am glad that I was a part of it, and it was a perfect day, despite the fact that these guys took it, on their own, own terms to make it whatever they wanted it to be. So anyways, but all that to say, they're married, and they're happily married. They have a beautiful family, and I'm so happy for them. And I get to watch them as their family continues to grow, and that's really special. So they're good friends of mine, and I love to watch our clients start their families and experience life together. So that's what it's all about. So anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed that story. And, like I always say, until y'all see me again next week, and I pretend like I can see y'all, but I can't really see you. But thanks for watching, and have a great week.